We are back with another episode of the Gold Standard here on Fox 19 now with Charlie Goldsmith. I'm Joe Daneman. Look, I understand what's happening this Sunday. It's Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and the new IT team in the NFL. The Bengals are trying to make a run for the playoffs. So why are we starting with the Reds? 2 words, Kyle Schwarber. Everybody in Cincinnati is wondering, Charlie, can the Reds do this? Can they find a path to get Kyle Schwarber to come back home and hit home runs at Great American Ballpark? You just posted a story on Charlie's chalkboard on Fox 19 now outlining the path, perhaps, to get Kyle Schwarber to Cincinnati. Can you walk us through it?
I can tell you the Reds have a path. And I can tell you that even after the Emilio Pagan signing, there's a window that remains open. For the Reds to get this across the finish line, a seminal franchise-changing move, one of the biggest in the last 20, 30 years of the franchise, probably right there behind the Ken Griffey Jr. signing. The key from the Reds' perspective is how creative they had to get with contract structure, with deferred money, with massaging the other salaries or even shedding other salaries on the roster to open up as much space as they can. And then there's Schwarber too. Frankly, he's going to have to really want to be a Red, and that's going to have to be really worth something to him. So I guess my message out there is start recruiting. You know, if you're out there on Twitter or if you're a Reds player, start recruiting Kyle Schwarber right now. And the Reds front office has to be cooking behind the scenes, some contingency ways to create some more financial flexibility. But this is very much on my radar.
You talked about Reds fans cooking right now on Twitter, recruiting. Boy, are they doing that at a rapid pace to try to create some kind of buzz here in Cincinnati. And who knows, maybe that does make a difference with maybe the front office understanding what the fan base wants, maybe Kyle Schwarber seeing this big groundswell in Cincinnati to get him here. Let's start there. How much do you think this would be a reaction from the Reds ownership and front office of hearing from the fan base saying, listen, we've lost some trust. This is one way for us to get some trust back in this organization.
I think that's definitely a part of it. I think, though, frankly, let's look at the bottom line. Like, you can just even look at it in a very analytical type way like that. Let's say this isn't happening. Let's say the Reds signed Cody Bellinger, who's a star free agent on the market. Kind of a similar tier as Schwarber, even though he wasn't as good as Schwarber was last season. Bellinger would sell some tickets. Bellinger isn't selling tickets like Kyle Schwarber. Yeah. Kyle Schwarber would sell tickets. Now look at Reds ownership. Their line for the last 2 decades has been, we invest in the team to break even. They don't want to, they don't want to put chips in that they feel like they can't make up on the back end, even though they probably should, but that's their strategy. Well, they would see investing in Kyle Schwarber as a very smart, safe investment because Schwarber would sell tickets in a true needle-moving way. So that's the type of thing you can go above your means for because it is very, very safe and realistic to expect some of that to be made up on the back end. Now, how much creativity, flexibility, wiggle room, that empowers the front office to kind of add on to the payroll they already had. That's the decision they're going to have to make.
Before the front office for the Reds could even get creative, is one of the bottom lines of Kyle Schwarber coming to Cincinnati, him taking less?
I can't answer that. I can't answer what but let me put it like this. Have the Reds ever won a bidding war against the Mets and the Phillies? Sure. And the Red Sox every team could use Kyle Schwarber. He was the second best hitter in the National League last season. Playing in Cincinnati is going to have to be worth something to him. Okay. And that's the unique thing the Reds can offer him. That's the reason we're not talking about Cody Bellinger. That's the reason this all works in the first place. If Kyle Schwarber's from Austin, this isn't even a thought process at all that's on my radar.
And he has said publicly multiple times now that, yeah, sure, young Kyle Schwarber would say, are you kidding me? Of course I'd love to play in Cincinnati. The question is, now that he's been in the league, and he's later in his career, wants to win, whatever reasons he wants to play, and wherever he wants to play, you got to wonder if that can tap back into him somewhere deep in his baseball soul to come back and play at Great American Ballpark.
One more thing, because this is a unique pitch, too, that the Reds have. Like, you can be our organization. Like, this is probably as close, even more than Ellie, to like a Joe Burrow that the Bengals could get. And again, Ellie has the higher ceiling. Everyone loves Ellie. But in the way that Burrow is just at the center of everything the Bengals organization is about, Burrow's out here saying, pay T. Higgins. Ellie's not going to do that. Ellie wasn't weighing in on the manager search or anything like Kyle Schwarber becomes the epicenter of your clubhouse, what your team means in the city. Kyle, Kyle, come be the guy here in your hometown is very interesting.
I mean, he's been an all-star, he's been in MVP conversations, but he's never been that anywhere he's played before. Maybe that's something that appeals to him. Just quickly, because I want people to read your full article on Charlie's chalkboard, but when you talk about getting creative, is that deferred money? Is that the Reds having to move on some current contracts that are on the team that have helped this team win games? Can you walk me through what getting creative would mean for the Reds to be able to financially do this with Kyle Schwarber? It's
a bunch of stuff you wouldn't do, again, if this was Cody Bellinger. And otherwise, you just say, this is too much, we can't do this. But because it's Schwarber, they might do, or they would have to do some stuff. That kind of stuff would probably be deferred money, which they have done before with Aroldis Chapman and with Bronson Arroyo, and then, of course, with Ken Griffey Jr. Back in the day, they'll probably have to trade at least one of their guaranteed contracts on the books. That would be, I mean, Gavin Lux plays the same position as Kyle Schwarber. Brady Singer's another name you could throw out. Brian Hayes and Jose Trevino were making some money as well. You would have to open up some salary, looking at other parts of the roster. You would probably, and I won't get into these weeds, but the whole arbitration process, you'd have to shift some things you do with those negotiations this year. And then most importantly, your depth now is what you've got. Like now Will Benson is your left fielder, and Blake Dunn is your backup center fielder, and Luis May is your sixth inning guy. So all of that factors into how creative the Reds will have to be.
Okay, so let's put a bow on this conversation here. And you've laid out all the reasons why, and some reasons there on the back end you're talking about with what the roster would look like, for maybe reasons you wouldn't do this deal. Do you think this is smart for the Reds to do something like this, to go for it, right? Because this would be the moment, right, where you have Kyle Schwarber, a guy who's from this area, who checks so many boxes for what this team needs on the field, off the field, and within the fan base. Would this be the smart thing for the Cincinnati Reds to do, roster construction-wise, to try to get over the hump, not only make the playoffs, but maybe win the NL Central and maybe do some damage in the playoffs? Do you think this would be smart for the Reds to do?
It wouldn't be the smart thing. Just like trading all your first-round picks for the #1 overall pick in the NFL draft, that's not the smart thing to do. But you know what? From an emotional and tangible perspective, the value of what this move could mean to the city, could mean to attendance, could mean to empowering the clubhouse, could mean to sending a signal to, maybe not this year because they wouldn't have a ton of money to spend, but sending a signal to other free agents around baseball, hey, come to the Reds. Like, this is a move that changes how people think of you. So from an emotional perspective, I think this is a very rare example where I think that outweighs the smart perspective. So I'd make this move.
The right move versus the smart move. Maybe it's the right move. Yeah, I'm with you. If you have a chance here to light a fire under your fan base and have this moment where you can thread a needle of a guy with his ability and where he's from and make that happen, you've got to do it. You got to give it a shot here. And it feels like there's a lot of smoke right now amongst national baseball people. You're reporting as well what you had out on Charlie's chalkboard and the way that the Reds can do this, that there is a path, that it's possible. Because when we've had discussions here the last couple of weeks, it felt like this didn't have a chance. And now here we are, even after Emilio Pagan's signing, that the Reds possibly do have a path to bring Kyle Schwarber to Cincinnati. We'll come back to the Reds. We'll talk about Kyle Schwarber and Emilio Pagan and how all this factors in with what a roster would look like. And I'm curious your thoughts on bringing Emilio Pagan back. But let's transition now to the Bengals because of a massive game this Sunday. And, we talked about national people, what they're saying about Kyle Schwarber and the Reds. All of a sudden, it feels like all the national talking heads are pointing at the Bengals saying, that's the it team that might make a run at this and win the AFC North. And just like last year, nobody wants to see the Cincinnati Bengals. Are you buying that the Bengals are back as a factor in the AFC North and the AFC playoff picture?
You have to set limits and guardrails in your own life. I'm refusing to talk about the Bengals until after the Baltimore game, which would be the week after this. If they go out and win 2 more and beat 2 teams with real playoff aspirations, and then you've got your easy schedule down the stretch, we'll have plenty of time over those 21 days to break down every playoff scenario and situation. But because of how much the strengths of Buffalo's offense attack, the weaknesses of the Bengals defense, because, we did a whole a really interesting segment, I thought, last week about how and why the Bengals defense is playing better. Also, so I chart down like the big negative plays and the big positive plays in every game. What are the 0-yard plays, et cetera. There were 5 0-yard plays for the Bengals against the Ravens that should have been really positive plays that really should have been huge plays for the Ravens. Like, there was one play where Geno Stone fell and the receiver just dropped the pass. There was a play where Josh Newton fell and Lamar Jackson just sailed to throw. There was likely should have been touchdown. The Jordan Battle knocked out at the end. Like, the Bengals defense created breaks but also got lucky. So that has me not saying, here, this defense has figured it out.
So you're skeptical. And yes. I think you should be skeptical, because on top of that as well, the offensive pass interference on Zay Flowers is one that a lot of people would point to and say, okay, guys get away with that all the time. So, again, the Ravens left some points on the field. But there's no doubt the defense has shown signs here the last few weeks. But you said there in your opening statement about the Bengals that the Bills have some strengths that can really test the Bengals' weaknesses on defense. We saw last week in Pittsburgh, Buffalo ran it 50 times for 250 yards at Pittsburgh. That, to me, is where I'm looking for the Bengals. Can they tackle James Cook? Can they tackle Josh Allen? Is that what's standing out to you as far as what the Bills can do offensively that should give the Bengals defense pause ahead of this game?
I mean, it's not rocket science. It's what these teams keep doing to the Bengals. It's these outside runs where they say to the linebackers, hey, come over here towards the sideline, and then they're out of position. It's getting multiple tight ends on the field and throwing out of that, something that Buffalo is really well suited to do. Those outside runs, those tackles, add into that, and because the Ravens weren't featuring it a ton, add into that Buffalo's quarterback run game, and what Allen can do outside the tackles. Hey, there was one play where Lamar actually was dead to rights with Barrett Carter as the spy. Barrett Carter just jumps like he pressed triangle on his Madden controller, and Lamar runs by him for a first down. So that kind of stuff has to be the best it's been all season, probably twice as good as it was in Baltimore, for the Bengals defense to have a similar type of performance in Buffalo.
Okay, so then what's the path for the Bengals to go to Buffalo on Sunday and upset the Bills and continue on with the good feelings that this team can make a run in the second half?
There are legit positives, and I will start with Joseph Ossai and Myles Murphy.
Yep.
And especially when you look at how Buffalo is banged up on the offensive tackle position, I am really believing what I'm seeing from Joseph Ossai, and I think Myles Murphy, to a lesser extent, but he's really on a nice upward trajectory that you really feel solid about with what he's shown over the last 4 weeks. So they've had impact, splash, drive, ending, or changing plays recently. Having 3 or 4 more of those between the two of them. Can one of those or 2 of those create a turnover opportunity in the secondary? That's the path for the Bengals defense.
Okay, what's the path for the Bengals offense? Because, listen, Joe Burrow is back, and Joe Burrow threw the ball more than 40 times against the Baltimore Ravens. And it wasn't just Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase had 7 catches, and I believe a total of 9 different players for the Bengals caught passes. And T. Higgins didn't even play in that game. So Joe Burrow's sharing the football, going where the football needs to go. That's what he does. It's one of his superpowers as a quarterback. What's the path offensively for the Bengals against the Bills? A team that, with Joe Burrow, they've traditionally done very well against, both here in Cincinnati and on the road in Buffalo in the playoff game.
The Bengals offense can do whatever it wants. Now, Buffalo has a very good pass defense. They have a lot of defensive backs and linebackers who have been in that system for a while. We talk about simplifying the Bengals defense. The Buffalo defense, because of that, is at a very advanced veteran stage. They've got a fantastic cover corner in Benford. They've got athletic pass rushers who maybe haven't put it all together over the course of the season, but they defend the pass very well. Still, I feel like this is a game where you'll have ideas and wrinkles to feature Jamar and T. If I remember this correctly, the Buffalo playoff game actually was the first time where the Bengals really started moving Jamar Chase around. Mm-hmm. That was the story of 2024. It's, hey, now we're moving him around all the time, and that's now completely baked into the playbook. So going back to what you did so much last year, what started in 22 in Buffalo, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Okay, so you have the great ability to look at film of the Bengals. You have the all-22, and I'm sure you did this with the offense. when you look back at what Joe Burrow did against the Baltimore Ravens, what stands out to you from the film work you've done watching Joe Burrow in his comeback game on Thanksgiving night at Baltimore? What stood out? The
quarterbacking with a capital Q. Burrow threw 2 touchdowns, and we all can picture them. We all watched the game. The touchdown to Tanner Hudson, the one-handed throw, an absolute dime. Some of the best accuracy we've ever seen from Burrow. Pretty normal reaction from Joe after that. Then there was the touchdown down the seam to Josevich at the end of the third quarter. I wrote a very long article about that, about one football play. I wrote that today. I was told from people in the building it was one of the best moments they've ever seen from Burrow. All of the work pre-snap that Burrow did to get the Bengals in the perfect position. A play call that was put in, and the whole point of the play call was whatever Baltimore does, we have an answer in there for Joe. He just has to find the right one. And Burrow found the right one in instantly a second, even though the Ravens ended up doing something in coverage on the play that they had never done against the Bengals before out of that blitz look. So Burrow goes, they're doing this, beep, boop, boop, Josevich.
Yeah.
And all that while literally 11 guys are rotating and revolving all over the field on the Ravens defense. And then he throws an absolute strike into an unbelievably tight window. So that was a perfect Burrow moment. He might be the only quarterback in the league who could have made that throw like that in that moment. And that guy's pretty good. I like watching that guy.
Yeah, and that's when he was like pounding his chest and hitting his helmet, because I'm sure it was multiple. It was the what a great throw I just made, but also look what I just diagnosed, and oh man, I'm all the way back now after making a play like that. That was a lot of fun to watch, just the reaction. I love that stuff from Joe Burrow because I think that empowers the entire team. If you look back at that play and you find the slow motion, you'll see the offensive lineman looking at him and seeing his reaction, and then they feel empowered to be excited about, okay, maybe we can do this thing, not only winning here tonight, but put together some kind of a run here over the next few weeks. I'm with you. I think they have to go to Buffalo and also beat Baltimore, and then I'll start to believe that they can do this. Certainly, I'm not going to sit here and put on a microphone and go on TV or anywhere streaming in Cincinnati and say the Bengals can't do it. You just don't do that. But right now, it just feels like it's such a tall mountain. Let's see what the Bengals do in Buffalo. Let's see what they do against Baltimore in the rematch game. And then we'll see where they are and what it looks like in the AFC North, because there is that runway of the final 3 weeks against Arizona, Miami, and Cleveland that you can sit here and say probably will be, if they win the next 2 games, will be favored to win those games. So I'm with you. Let's see what happens in Buffalo and against Baltimore. But I can understand why Bengals fans are excited, because they saw what they saw last year and they see what it looks like with Joe Burrow. They haven't lost this year with Joe Burrow. They haven't lost in 8 straight games with Joe Burrow on the field. So I understand the excitement in the fan base. We'll come back to the Bengals when we get to the Gold Rush. Let's talk again now about the Reds. We talked at the top of the podcast about Kyle Schwarber. The Reds did make a move this week. Emilio Pagan is back as their closer. Let's start there. Is he immediately slotted in as their closer? That's what he did last year, 32 saves, tied for 5th most in the major leagues. Is he immediately the closer in 2026?
I was told the Reds really put a lot of value into having someone who they knew pretty comfortably was a strong, consistent, reliable 9th inning guy. Now, Santillan maybe, but even some of the young guys like Connor Phillips or Luis May at some point down the road over the next 2 years, one of them could grow into that 9th inning role. Maybe like I'm just spitballing. Pagan misses a week and one of them shines as a closer. Part of what you love about Pagan too is he'll pitch the 8th, he'll pitch the 7th, he'll pitch the 2nd. He'll do whatever you need from him. They're keeping a runway for one of these younger guys to emerge one day, but they really value in the present and now his proven ability to pitch the 9th.
In the big picture, the money, the years, the investment in Emilio Pagan after what he did last year, good move by the Reds?
It was a nice, solid single up the middle. It was a move that, to be honest, I expected Pagan to get more.
Yeah.
I was surprised that that's where the price range landed. I expected Pagan to be more out of the Reds' price range in the closer market and for them to have to try to be more creative there. But Pagan, really what I expected too was for the Reds to wait maybe until January to let the market settle and then try to find value. Kind of, you can get things at a discount when they've been on sale for a bit, to use a shopping metaphor. But no, they got Pagan at pretty good value right now to fill what they viewed was their biggest right now need, which was they didn't have a closer. And he's a guy who everyone in the organization loves, and that doesn't hurt as well.
We understand that the Kyle Schwarber pursuit would change a lot of what this team is doing in the offseason. Let's just go into a vacuum and say the Kyle Schwarber pursuit isn't happening. Okay, what should be next on the Reds' radar? If Kyle Schwarber doesn't happen, what should they be focusing on next? Because they've got closer done, but the bullpen still needs more work.
That, but also to put out a team on opening day, they're going to need another option who hits right-handed and ideally can play the outfield. So, and I think there'd be, you'd put even a little star next to the names of the guys who can play center field. One of those is actually left-handed. But names like J.J. Blade, who's the left-hander, Lane Thomas, who's a strong fit in center, Rob Refsnyder, a center fielder. Maybe it's Miguel Andujar, who was more of a DH last year with the Reds. Guys like that is a very important role. Austin Hayes, that they don't have covered right now. And then they need a left-hander in their bullpen as well. Ideally, someone who has some experience in high-leverage opportunities.
Okay, let's go now to the Gold Rush. These are rapid-fire questions, and we'll go back to the Bengals on this. Again, you watch film. You watch video closer than anybody, myself included, watches the Bengals. If you go back to the Baltimore game, who's the one under-the-radar guy who stood out to you as maybe the average fan didn't pick out that this player had a great game? Because I mentioned it earlier. Joe Burrow went all over the place with his passes. Mitchell Tinsley had 9 targets. Tanner Hudson had a one-hand touchdown catch. You saw guys making plays in the backfield. Joseph Osai, Miles Murphy. It felt like Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight had moments. Demetrius Knight's getting more time on third down. I'm throwing out all these scenarios to give yourself a chance to think. Have you landed on the one player you think that Bengals fans should leave the Baltimore game feeling better about?
It's not splashy, and they've each played better games, but the safeties, Geno Stone and Jordan Battle. Now, I did mention one time Geno slipped early in the game, but what they've done as blitzers, you talk about the versatility of the defense and what they're putting on these guys' plates. What they've done with Geno and Jordan, having them disguise more at the line of scrimmage and trusting that they'll be able, when asked to drop back and cover deep down the field. They did a lot of really subtle stuff in addition to just some true pressures as pass rushers. So I feel much better about where they're at than I was a month ago. And again, it wasn't either of their best games, but I was impressed with what I saw.
If you go back to the play that Joseph Osai made in the Baltimore backfield, inside Baltimore's own 5-yard line when he caused the fumble and Cedric Johnson picked it up. If you look at the disguise of that play, that was a third down. Am I correct? I'm not sure if it was a third down.
That feels right.
Doesn't even matter.
It's in my notebook upstairs.
The Bengals had, I believe, 7 players at the line of scrimmage, and right before the ball was snapped, there goes Geno Stone, there goes Barrett Carter, and Barrett Carter drops back right into coverage.
And he says he doesn't watch the film.
Ha! I saw this one play. Somebody put it on Twitter. Give me some. Yes. Barrett Carter goes right into the path of Lamar Jackson's first read, causing him to wait a beat, look somewhere else, and boom, Joseph Osai hits him. That's the kind of difference disguising a defense can make. It took 12 weeks for Al Golden and this defense to get to the point where they feel comfortable doing these kinds of things, and you see the difference it makes once you get to the point where you can disguise defenses and mess with the quarterback's head, and it helped against Lamar Jackson. The Bengals had 5 turnovers in that game. Let me flip it, okay? The one player that I asked was, who stood out? Who's the one player Bengals fans should be concerned about after watching the film in Baltimore? And take this on a big picture, right? This isn't just one game. Guys have bad games. But who had not a great game on top of what's been a season that you're kind of questioning that Bengals fans might be worried about here the final 5 weeks?
We've talked about the rookie linebackers. My answer to that question is Barrett Carter. Another kind of under-the-radar one who I'll take the second to talk about is someone who I was very high on in the preseason, but that's Josh Newton. You see teams going after him when he's on the field on third downs. He's gotten more third down opportunities, actually not after Cam Taylor-Britt's injury. Marco Wilson got that first opportunity, but then Marco Wilson got hurt. He was a bench guy, and now you're seeing Josh Newton on the field more. I mentioned it earlier. There was a play where he just fell,
Yeah.
and he needed to be in better position. If teams continue to try to take deep shots, he'd be the guy you'd go up against in man coverage. So he's on my radar as a guy who you'd probably need to take a step forward.
Is the offensive line playing as well as they're grading out?
Yeah, the offensive line is in a solid spot. I think the one thing it's missing is you're not seeing enough wow moments from Orlando Brown Jr. And in specific matchups, you're seeing more losses from Orlando Brown Jr. in specific games and specific moments. But on the whole, you will sign up for this 10 times out of 10 with Joe Burrow for a team that hasn't invested a ton in guards. You will absolutely win with this against pretty much any defense.
Is the Myles Murphy glow up for real?
It's real. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter on the 2026 Bengals yet. What I don't see is like a theme and a trend. I haven't seen something unlock for Myles, like, oh, he's doing this now, so that's why he's looking like this. What I do see is a guy who's walking taller, who has a better look in his eye, who just truly looks and acts and plays more focused and confident. There's more room there, I see, but this is the best football he's ever played.
Is the Evan McPherson bounce-back season the most under-talked-about part of the Cincinnati Bengals?
100%. And it hasn't happened yet, but I think there's going to be an opportunity in the next couple weeks where you see it reflected in Zach Taylor's play calling. There's going to be a 3rd and long where they're on the fringe of field goal range. I think 3rd and 27 against the Chiefs in 2021, one of my favorite moments, because they went for the kill. But then they had McPherson in their back pocket, because if that deep ball to Chase against the Chiefs a couple of years ago was incomplete, well, then just McPherson will boot the 55, 60-yarder. And there is that level of confidence in Evan right now. It can change the way you manage a game.
Are we finally getting to see Al Golden cook a little bit more, turn some pages in the playbook, and start with those disguises and more blitzes because the defense now has more experience?
I'm changing my answer because the guy who really shined the most under the radar was just Al as a play caller. Joseph Osai had a sack where nobody blocked him.
No, untouched.
That is Al Golden. Al Golden got that sack. Demetrius Knight's pick with the disguise and the pressure and the blitz. A tight end was blocking Myles Murphy, so Murphy swatted the pass and it went to Demetrius Knight. That is Al Golden's pick. So, we could keep going with these, but that all goes on the defensive coordinator.
Okay, now time for the Gold Nugget. This is where Charlie gets to take over at the end of the show and share a great story, a great interview he's working on or has done from the notebook. I know the notebook's back upstairs. You already mentioned that once. But if you can think to your notebook here and find a good nugget here, what is the Gold Nugget for today's Gold Standard?
Less a nugget, more just something I'd like to say. Mustafa Cham and Baba Miller are the keys to the Crosstown Shootout on Friday.
Yes, I was going to finish the show with a thought on the shootout because you go to both Xavier and UC games. You're one of the rare guys here in Cincinnati that goes and watches both teams. Do you have a thought on the shootout outside of Baba Miller, who is huge for UC to have him back in this scenario? Do you have a thought or a feeling on who this game might lean towards?
This game is an unbelievable matchup advantage for UC because ever since Xavier changed their starting lineup and went with Carroll and Milicevic as their 4-5, they've been unbelievably susceptible from a rebounding perspective. They don't have rim protection. They played well, but they don't have rim protection, and they can't protect their rim. So you've even seen some of these bye games, physical, long, dynamic 4s and 5s. They have a field day. Cham's been massively inconsistent. Baba Miller's coming back from injury. This should be a matchup where they have Xavier out of answers because Xavier doesn't have a guy who can match up with them, really, since they changed their starting lineup. Robinson's not playing as much. This should be their day, but I don't know how you can be too confident in UC right now when you look at the malaise they've been in. So the fact that it is such a matchup advantage in UC's favor makes this an unbelievable amount of pressure to me from a Bearcats perspective.
And a lot of pressure on Wes Miller to get this in a year that's already pressurized for him to get to the NCAA tournament. For Xavier, the way to counter that would be, okay, if you have those guys as your 4 and 5, they're going to have to shoot it well to win the shootout. Plus, the game is at Cintas Center, and that's worth so much in this rivalry. Is that the path for Xavier? They've got to knock down maybe 10 threes to beat UC? Is that the number that I would land on, or is that the path, do you think, for Xavier?
Yes, of course. I'm going to double back to just the way they finish at the rim, because that generally hasn't been a strength all season for Xavier, and keeps going back to these guys. Miller and Cham have to block shots. Because if they do that, that can take Trey Carroll out of the game because his game's either going to be spot up threes and then that spin move around the rim. Milicevic, that'll take away his post game because he's not getting his shot up over those guys. So do those guys play well? Impacts entirely what Xavier can and can't do offensively. Because if they can't get to the rim, then they will not just be living and dying by their three. That'll be the only thing they can even try.
You going?
Of course.
So you're going to the shootout Friday.
Yes.
You go to Buffalo Saturday.
Yes.
You cover the Bengals and Bills Sunday. Then you hop on a plane for Orlando Sunday night for MLB's winter meetings, where the Reds all of a sudden are going to be under a spotlight here because of Kyle Schwarber, right?
Suddenly they are now, that's for sure. And it'll be funny, too, to see how much Schwarber buzz you feel with other teams. Because so far, the Reds have been kind of the fun team to talk about with Schwarber.
All right, so make sure you follow Charlie all week long, all weekend long, as he'll be covering the Bengals, then off to Major League Baseball's winter meetings. We'll be back here next week to talk about it all, Bengals and Bills, looking ahead to the Ravens game and also any buzz Charlie feels at MLB's winter meetings. That was the Gold Standard. Thanks for watching right here on Fox 19 Now.